Hey everybody, it's Chris and Rick Talk Guitars, and today we're going to talk about one-owner guitars. This is a trait touted by, salespeople all the time or guitar shops, hey, it's a one-owner guitar. And Chris and I kind of find it a fascinating topic because, it really could mean different things. But the intention is, hey, one person owned this guitar, and so therefore the implication is that it's not as used or banged up or, in better shape, let's say, than a guitar that maybe has got changed hands like 4 or 5 times. But Chris, I'd like you to start it off because I know this is a topic near and dear to your heart.
Well, I'm just confused by it. And like you said, I think it's probably going to mean different things to different people. When you describe it right there is not usually how I thought of it, but
Oh, okay.
that's interesting because that parallels kind of the car that was owned by a little old lady who only drove to church on Sundays.
Right.
Is that kind of your meaning of that?
Well, that's my interpretation. Like when
And that
I
might be
hear
what
somebody,
it is. I'm not
yeah,
saying it's
like,
not.
but I'd love to hear yours. But yeah, my like when somebody tells me, "Hey, one owner guitar," it's like, oh, in my opinion, what I'm inferring is, hey, this guitar's only been owned by one person, and therefore it hasn't changed hands.
Right. If that was fucking Gigi Allen was the person that owned it, that's going to mean something different. That's why I'm so confused by it. Another thing
Exactly.
I'm confused by is, all right, so I'm going to buy a vintage guitar and I want something that's going to hold its value. And that's quite an attractive quality in an
Yeah.
vintage instrument.
Yeah.
So as soon as I buy this one owner guitar, it's no longer a one owner guitar. So it just lost value and I haven't even walked out the fucking door.
Right.
I mean, in that way, it doesn't make any sense to me. But I get what you're saying. So it is. So it's something like a closet classic. I mean, people will use that like is some under someone's bed for 100 years. Is it kind of that thing to use? That kind of
Yeah,
thing?
and I think I want you to flesh out what your interpretation is, but yeah, and by that I mean the value would be more because it is a one owner guitar than it would be if it had changed hands like 4 or 5 times, right? Because then in my mind, I mean that's my interpretation is in my mind the implication is, hey, once it got into circulation, who knows what happened to this damn thing, and
Right.
but like you said, some one person could have owned it and gigged every night of their life for 50 years in smoke-filled bars and leaned it up against his amp or her amp and beat the shit out of this thing, and it could be a one-owner guitar. So,
Yeah, I kind of always thought too that it might have meant something more like we know the whole story of this guitar because this
there
is
you go.
one
Yeah.
owner and he bought it and he has the sales literature and he knows the whole story because I am 100% into the story of guitars. You know what I
Yes.
mean? That's something I'm always interested in. I only have one guitar that I think I know the story of from new. It's a two-owner guitar. But I actually have a video somewhere of this guitar being played live at the Crocodile in the 90s.
Oh,
And
that's
it's
so
so funny
cool.
to see my guitar and it's like brand new. So, because I know the person that bought it, who bought it originally, and I
What
bought it
was that
from
a
them.
selling point to you? One-owner guitar?
No, but it was, but I'm, like I said, I'm into the story.
Yeah,
I'd love
yeah.
to know who owned my The Paul, my
Me
Gibson Les
too.
Paul. It's
Yeah.
one
Oh,
of my
yeah.
older guitars. I'm like,
Yeah.
what happened to this guitar? And for me, a better selling feature for a vintage instrument is this. I don't know where the guitar has been. It's touched many hands. Look at all the stories this could tell. It's kind of
Yeah.
cool. If you could trace some of that would be cool. But usually the best sounding and vibey guitars are the ones that have been played to shit. And those
Yeah.
might be a
Yeah.
one owner, but I can't see any one thing that was where you just say to someone, it's a one owner, and everybody in the room goes, oh, I got you. I know what that means. Maybe it does, and maybe I don't know, but it's something. It's kind of hilarious too because it's important. And it's the type of thing that if I bought a guitar and it turned out to be a one owner, when I was telling people about it, I would be mentioning, yeah, it's a one owner too, because it's something that has this currency, but I don't really fucking understand because to me, I'm way into the stories of guitars, but I want to know this guitar was played like, Emerald City Guitars does those little stories where they go out and find
Yeah.
gear
I
and they
love
tell
it.
the stories. But I love that shit. Like the
Yeah.
dude with the banjo that had that
Yeah. The
amp,
Dumble. Yeah. The
the
Dumble.
Dumble
Yeah.
Super Reverb. Yeah. I mean, I love shit. So that, and I want to know that about the guitar. I want to, that shit I'm always into, but the one owner or it's cool to see something like a time capsule. I
Oh,
get
yeah.
that aspect of it. I've seen those. You've seen those too. And then they
Yep.
come in there
Yep.
like, look, it's the original strap and it's still like wrapped with whatever. It's never been used, the
All the
strap.
case
It's
candy.
like some
Yeah.
Christmas gift for some rich kid who just like, I don't want to play anymore.
But
So
for my clarity, so your interpretation is more the lineage of the story of the guitar. That's the when people say that one owner guitar, it's like they know they know everything about this guitar, or as much as anybody could know. Is that what you're
Maybe
saying? The
that's
provenance?
kind of like
Okay.
where I would see it like having a little extra value.
Yeah.
Like, I know exactly where this guitar's been its entire
Yeah.
life. But I see what you're saying too. It's one owner, so it hasn't been to hell and back and through all this crap, which to me is can be an attractive thing. So
Yeah.
let me ask you now that we sort of touched on that topic of guitar stories. Do you know the stories behind any of your vintage guitar? How many vintage guitars do you have?
I've got that Antigua Strat, and
Oh,
Jay
that's true.
told
That's
me
right.
that it was either Black Oak, Arkansas, or one of those bands. It wasn't Black Oak, Arkansas. What was it? It was one of those bands. So with the guitar
Kiss.
player, it was
It was either Black Oak, Arkansas, or Kiss. I don't know because those are the
either
only
one of
bands I
those
can
two
think of right now.
bands. But anyway, it was one of those bands, and one of those, the guitar player, he owned that guitar, supposedly, that Antigua
Right.
Strat. And so I know a little bit about the Antigua. The ES330, I know nothing about. And I didn't ask. I should ask.
Right.
I will ask
You
next
didn't
time I'm
ask
in
how
there.
many owners they had. I want documentation for every
It didn't say
owner.
on the tag one owner, so,
Did it?
but no, it didn't.
Oh,
It
it
did
didn't.
not
Okay.
say one owner, no.
Okay.
But I'm the same way. I love the stories behind guitars, and like I was alluding to earlier, like, yeah, this Telly was owned by a guy that played country in Texas, and he toured throughout the southern
Right.
United States, and you can see the cigarette burn in the headstock and all this other cool shit, and then you open the case, and yeah, it smells like it's been played in every bar,
Uncle
and
Vinny's, like
Uncle Vinny's, yeah.
Billy's wallet.
But to me, like as a buyer, that doesn't really compel me. It's a one owner guitar,
No, it's gonna be, yeah.
If as long as if it's been owned several times and they kind of know some stuff about it, that's cool for me. And if it's in decent shape, and like you said, it's like my expectation is when I buy a used guitar or vintage guitar is that it's going to be dinged up and it's going to be played.
Broken in. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I mean.
like if I want a pristine guitar, I'm not going to buy a used or a vintage guitar. I'm going to go buy a brand new guitar that I can
Yeah.
put dings on. So that's another, yeah, it's interesting to think about how people perceive that. That now that we're talking about it too, it's like I wonder what other people's perception is of that term, one owner guitar.
Right. I think I don't think we've actually talked about this on the podcast, but I think either on Facebook or something like that, just chatting with many people, like dropping shit down the chute. I think I've mentioned that before, and some people have chimed in, and it's interesting because they all had different kind of ideas
What
of
were
what
some
they
of the
are.
ideas that can
I
you
don't
remember
remember.
offhand?
I
Yeah.
have no fucking
We'll
memory.
have to revisit
But
that. And also we're soliciting feedback on this too. So all you people out there in the interwebs, chime in. Go
But
ahead.
so going back to my Telecaster, that its little star story, minor star story.
Yeah.
It was on tour with Mazzy Star. It
That's
was the
cool.
guitar player who was in a band here back in the '90s, but he also was touring. He was the touring guitarist with Mazzy Star, and I bought it directly from him. And it was so funny because he had two Telecasters. One was a vintage, a really cool, like early '70s vintage. It may have even been one of those thin lines. And he had this one and he liked them both, but he's like, these guitars just can't stay in tune. They can't stay in tune. My tech is pulling out his hair. He can't do anything about it. And I said, let me take a look. And I took him in the back room and I took a nut file and just the G string and the B string, just they were a little high. And I
Uh-huh.
kind of just took them down and kind of ran sandpaper through there a few times. I brought it on. And he goes, what did you do? It's like my tech could have never figured this out because it took me like 5 minutes.
You
And
need a
that's
new
the first
tech.
thing, the
Yeah.
first thing you look for. So, and he was really, he loved the 52 reissue which is the one that I bought, but he said, I just can't, this thing just won't play in tune. I just can't figure it out.
Interesting.
The one unfortunate thing is he had the six, because he couldn't figure out why it wouldn't stay in tune. So
Uh-huh.
his tech put the six, those 52 Telecasters came with a 3 saddle bridge
Oh,
and a
right.
6 saddle bridge. So he had the 6 saddle on it and he came in a few more times after that. And I kept bugging him. Hey, did you find that 3 saddle bridge? Because that's the one that has a serial number on it. He's
Right.
like, no, I can't find it. So one
Oh,
of the first
man.
purchase I ever made on eBay when I found out, hey, there's this thing where you can go buy stuff, is I bought a 52 issue bridge, like a
That's
used one for
awesome.
that.
That's
So
awesome.
actually, it's not a 50. It's just a Fender 3 saddle bridge. It's
And
not.
so
It
he
doesn't
bought
have a
it
serial
new.
number.
So he was
He
the
did.
original owner. That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
And it was 1990. So I think it was like mid 1990. So he bought it around that time. And the video footage that I have, I wish I could remember the name of his band. They were kind of a cool indie,
Uh-huh.
like, of the 90s style, cool rock band. That was from probably maybe 94 or something like that. I think that video at the Crocodile.
Uh-huh.
I bookmarked it somewhere, so I want to see if I can find it if it's still up because it's kind of cool to see my guitar.
And that's a cool guitar, and that's a cool that is compelling to, kind of know that your guitar was owned by, somebody that has some juice and stuff. And it reminds me again of like Joey, Jay's son down at Emerald City Guitars. We're going to keep name dropping that thing because we always do. One of his big idols is Elvis Costello, and he bought or he traded Elvis for this cool Jazzmaster that's just cool, and it's been through the
Wow.
ringer. I think the paint is a refin and stuff, but it's so cool. And I don't know how many owners that thing has had. It looks like many. But the fact that it comes from that one source, the latest source, is so fucking cool. And it's so cool to Joey because that's his guy. You know what I mean?
Right,
So
right.
for me, that would be more compelling than a one owner guitar. Well, I mean, and probably to most people, right? If you're
Yeah.
buying this guitar from somebody that has some kind of clout or some juice, but
There's some of just a cool story, but yeah, you're right. The
yeah,
star power thing,
totally.
and that's kind of, I mean, that's the classic question, like who is the owner? Is it
Yeah.
to have that value? But I've always been a little confused by that term because if it gets thrown out there and it's something I would probably say myself because I'm like that's a good thing, right? But I
Well,
don't
it
know.
is funny though to think about because yeah, like you're saying, like just today, I didn't know that our perceptions were a little different than, and like you say, I really would look forward to seeing other people's perception of what that means to them when they hear one owner guitar because yeah, it could mean a range of things and like we said before, it's like this thing could have sat under somebody's bed for 20 years, or they could have gigged with the damn thing everywhere, or they could have been in a punk band and smashed the shit out of this thing and it's a one owner guitar, but check it out. It's like it needs it needs all this work because it's
As guitar
been
players,
through the
it's our
ringer.
duty from here forth to make little stories for and keep them in the pockets of our guitar cases,
Wouldn't that be
so people
cool?
know where these did. Like important events that happened with these, and I use this from blah 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 blah. I did these blah blah blah, and then for future generations. And then when they take them and they take the orbital sander to relic them, they'll know at least where
You
they've
can
been.
document it. Yeah,
Yeah,
you could,
exactly.
this idiot took an
I
orbital
used an
sander.
orbital sander on this date to make this
I
polyester.
routed it out for a Floyd. It's a 52 tail. Yeah. That's a great idea, actually. Like hey, any manufacturers out there, you should put a little notebook in your brand new guitars that you sell to say, hey, document the how many people have owned this and what they've done to it. But yeah,
Yeah, and that Telecaster is probably the one for my personal has probably the most personal stories where it's been the farthest and played the most shows.
yeah,
Although my junior and now my 345 are going to be catching up because I used the junior exclusively since like 2007, and then now for the last 3 years at least it's exclusively the 345. But the
uh,
Telecaster went from 96 all the way up to like 2006, so a good 10 years.
so I wonder if there's like a range. Like this is a two owner guitar, or this is a three owner guitar.
There should be.
You know what I mean? Like there's this scale of
Or when you're keeping data on a customer that like is, you're looking out for an instrument for them. How many owners do they want? Like if they're looking
right.
for something between a 3 to 5 owner guitar.
I'm
Hey, I think I
comfortable with
got one. I
that.
got a
Yeah.
Strat 62. It's got three, and it might have been another owner. We're not sure. So you still want it?
So again, is that compelling to you? One owner, like if you go into a shop and you see this used guitar and they say, "Hey, one owner guitar," is
I'm
that
not even
like,
hearing
oh,
anything. If I'm
yeah,
looking at a
yeah,
guitar like that,
yeah,
especially if it's a vintage thing, I'm not hearing anything going
yeah,
on
same
around me.
here. Yeah,
I'm like, there it is.
your eyes glaze over.
And it wouldn't matter because by the time you have the thing in your hands and you've kind of looked it over, you've made up a decision. I don't care if it's a no owner guitar, one owner, 100 owners, or whatever. I've already decided that I like this guitar, and it's
Yeah, because I think it would be more compelling for me to know, hey, it's been owned by a few people and we kind of know the lineage of this guitar. That's cool. Rather than, hey, this one guy owned it and he stuck it under his bed for 20 years.
well, you've
That's not
seen
a
that,
compelling story.
right? I've
Um,
seen that in certain forums, like whether it's I don't know Facebook guitar poster forums, actual forums, or anything
yeah.
like that, where someone will post a picture of the guitar, and there's someone that comes up, and says, "Hey, I used to have that guitar," or
Yeah,
"I know
that's
that guitar.
cool.
My friend had that guitar."
Yeah.
And and there's always like these stories of people that are looking for, not necessarily been stolen. I hate stolen guitar stories. Those are horrible. But somebody that said, "Hey," kind of like me. It's like back in the day, I had this guitar. It's kind of a stupid guitar. No one would care about it but me. But I sold it, and I've been looking for it ever since. Before I got my Gibson The Paul, that
Uh-huh.
was one of the only guitars that I ever regretted getting rid of. And there was times when like maybe a couple times I got on Facebook and I tried to find the guy that I sold it to in Michigan to see, do you still have that? Because I'm sure he wasn't a guitar player. He was just like, oh, this might be
Yeah.
something neat. So he probably never took it out because he was, he's probably older and didn't have time. But I never found him. And then shortly after that, I found this one that's the same year and just
That's
like
cool.
looks like the same damn guitar. So, and
Yeah.
it's weird. And I don't remember the specifics of this, but back when I used to post on Instagram, and I posted that guitar a couple of times, and someone commented in a Instagram thread that said, "Hey, did you get that at Thunder Road Guitars?" Which I did, and they're like,
Uh-huh.
"That used to be my guitar." And
Oh,
I was
that's
going to
so
follow
cool.
up and see if they had any info. So I don't know if he was the one owner or just one.
You should just for kicks. I think that would
Yeah,
be cool just to say, hey, did you buy it new or not? Or
yeah. No, but I'm definitely into the stories of guitars. You
me
know what I mean?
too.
That Telecaster, to keep talking about that, is it was very clean when I got it. You know, it was definitely this. The case is great because there's cigarette burns all over the case, and
I
there's like
love
little
it.
cartoons that somebody drew on there. So that was the Mazzy Star tours, all that shit probably happened. I've got brown spots on the board. I've worn the nitro off the where the arm sits all the way down to that thick fuller blast,
That's
so it's
awesome.
clear. It looks like those. You know, those bolo ties with a scorpion in it. It's like that over the wood, but it's beautiful. It's,
That's a killer guitar.
and it feels good. It's got a people like Telecaster players today would hate that guitar because A, it's heavy, and B, it's got a kind of a skinny neck, and three, it has it has the thick finish, which I don't mind.
Maybe that is too what most people think of when they hear one on a guitar is this the knowing kind of knowing the lineage of the guitar or more about it than something that's changed hands. But the stories, even if they know the partial story, to me is much more intriguing for a
Right,
guitar anyway. And I keep thinking about Peter Frampton's guitar, that Phoenix guitar. That's a cool story.
right,
Where he was on tour and the plane that had their gear went down and crashed and he lost a bunch of gear. Somebody picked that guitar up and used it as their guitar in a cover band or whatever in I
right.
don't even where South
It was in
America or
Mexico,
something.
in South America,
Yeah,
Mexico. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And finally somebody saw the guitar and said that's Frampton's guitar and eventually he was reunited with it. But Jesus, like if that was sitting in a music store somewhere and that story was tied to that guitar, that would be super compelling to I think
Right, right.
anybody that was looking for a guitar like that had the
Or
guitar.
Harrison's Lucy. The same thing kind of
Yeah,
happened. I
yeah,
think that got stolen and he found it eventually. And I think that might have been Mexico where
yeah.
it turned up and the guy was like, "Yeah, I don't want to sell it to you." I'm like, "It's George fucking
Can you
Harrison."
imagine
And he's like,
that?
but he talked him
It's
into
my
it.
number
Like
one guitar.
he had to buy him like two Les Pauls so he
I
could get Lucy
know.
his red. That's the Gently
That's
Weeps guitar.
yeah, that's
But
the
he
one
got it, but he got it back.
that's one he casually just put on the drum riser on that in the get back
Oh yeah,
sections and
it's
let
like, oh,
slide
there
off
goes
and
that.
there's the
There's that
headstock.
headstock. Yeah, and there's another one. I think Billy Corgan has a stolen reunite guitar story,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the dude I forget his name, but he was from April Wine.
Oh
That
God, I
dude
love
had
it.
a cool, I think it was like a Junior or so. It was some weird guitar that was heavily modified that he
Uh-huh.
used back in the day, and he lost it, and he got it back. I love those stories. You know, the
I do
last you
too.
come home stories will always be my. But again, I have a book actually, and I'll lend it to you next time I
Yeah,
see you. It's actually called Guitar Stories, and it's got a bunch of
that's
people
cool.
talking about guitars that kind of changed their lives or things that really the stories behind these guitars and where they got
Yeah,
them. It's like Dave Alvin, and I think it's Roseanne Cash, and just a bunch of people. But I always wanted to write a book about talking to people about not even guitars, it's just like gear in general, things that really like pulled songs out of you or just
yeah.
changed your life. They don't have to be star-owned guitars. I have guitars sitting over there that did that. I had an old Guild acoustic guitar that got like two records full of music in a short period of time. And when I got the guitar, it just started to steer me in that direction. And this is getting off track, but that's kind of what the one owner guitar says to me.
Yeah, and my interpretation was that maybe if one person owned it, it was taken better care of, or maybe it was in better shape than something that had changed hands multiple times. But yeah, it's cool because I didn't really know, to be honest, before this discussion, what your interpretation was. I just assumed it was like mine, but what you brought up makes perfect sense too. It's like, well, we can trace the history of this guitar. It was bought at Bandstand East in 1978, and this is the guy that bought it, and blah blah blah. Yeah, and that's cool, and that is cool to know. But like you said, I just love even partial stories about gear and guitars, and then also just seeing the wear on the guitar. You can imagine what the stories are.
Right.
This thing was played in bars and smoke-filled places and stuff.
I've got a PRS that pulled me out of a burning building. I'll never part with it.
Yeah, I'm going to talk to Trevor and other people too and see what their interpretation is because those are the guys that use that term all the time. But I've never bothered to ask. I just always stand around like you, with my eyes glazed over, and they recite all these things that are meaningful supposedly. And I'm like, okay, cool. I just take
So
for
if you're
granted
down
that.
there
Yeah.
and they're making a transaction and that comes up, be sure to point out to the seller that,
I will.
when you buy this is immediately going down in value because you being the second
Get
owner.
off the lot, you're screwed, man. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's like
exactly.
a new guitar. I mean, as soon as you buy a new guitar and you walk out the door, it just went down in value.
That's so
Vintage
funny.
guitars aren't supposed to do that. So, in some ways, the one owner guitar thing is kind of not a huge selling point.
Well, that's a great point, right? So what
It's
if I
not. It's
buy?
just my joke.
No, no, no. But it is a because like if I go in and buy a Squire Strat, if it's a one owner guitar, what it doesn't matter anymore. I don't know. I guess in terms of just knowing the story about it, but in terms of value, it's not going to really impact the guitar. I
I'm
don't
trying to
think.
think of one owner guitars that I've dealt with that had some sort of cool story. Punky Brewster. I don't know if you remember from the 90s. You remember that?
Yes, I remember that.
I sold her, and it was a super cool guitar. She it wasn't her, but it was somebody that got the guitar from her. So it must have been a two-owner guitar. But they got it from her, and it was a really cool USA made in the 80s Epiphone. It was called a Special. It was an SG shape. It had one humbucker pickup
Oh
on
my
it.
gosh,
It was great. It was
that's cool.
basically a Gibson, 100% Gibson, but they were trying this run where they're going to do these Epiphones in the USA. And I'm playing that and I'm like, this thing is great. I didn't have any money. I wanted to buy it. And I sold it to a couple, like an older couple that came in to buy them for their kid. And they're like, we have this much money to spend. And I'm like, oh my God, this guitar, you got to get this guitar. It's like the best. It was like $300 because it says Epiphone and nobody knew who it was. And I
Did
kind
you
of,
tell them about Punky?
what?
Did you
No,
tell
I
them
didn't.
about
I
Punky?
didn't use
You
the
should.
punky owner story, but I was just so into that guitar, and I'm like, this kid is going to be so psyched. They bought it for the kid. It was like $300,
That's great. That's
and they bought it for the
awesome.
kid. And then like a day or two later, they came in and said he doesn't really like it. It's only got one pickup, and it's like,
Oh my
oh my
gosh.
God! And I went and got him like the cheapest thing I could afford. That kid doesn't
Did you pinch
deserve
his ear? You should
a
have pinched
guitar.
his ear.
No, Punky Brewster, you don't get her that guitar.
That's hilarious. I just flashed to the tag, like, I could see Jay writing the tag. A punk
No, it wasn't. No, it
previously.
was just the person who brought it in to sell it gave that information, and
Right,
no one
right,
seemed to
right.
care. I did something once that was kind of mean, I guess, because someone brought in some guitar that had, I don't even remember what the signature was, and we were going to
Uh-huh.
resell it. They traded it for another
Uh-huh.
guitar, right? So this is ours. We have to sell it now.
Yeah.
And I was the one that got changed the strings and got everything ready in front of him. I just wiped off the autograph because it was something that I thought, no one's going to buy this for
Oh,
that. And I'm thinking afterwards, like, that was probably a shitty thing to do. This guy was all proud, and I'm over there like, got to get this thing off so we
I
can
cleaned up
sell
your
it.
guitar.
But I wish I could remember who the autograph was. It was someone
Probably Jeff
seriously.
Beck.
No, it wasn't anybody like
No,
that. I wouldn't have done that. It was somebody that would, and maybe there was one person in the
that's
world that would have bought
hilarious.
it for that, but it was definitely where it was in the time in the 90s in Seattle at a vintage guitar store, it would have sold faster without whatever that
Got
was.
it.
And I
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
remember
got
it.
it.
The fact that I can't remember it says that
Oh my God,
it
that's
probably wasn't a good one, but
hilarious.
I should have done that in the back room.
Right.
I just saw him looking at him like, and then I go, oh shit. Like,
Get out of here. That's hilarious, dude. Oh
who's
my
this
God.
asshole?
That was my dad. He's dead now. Yeah. I can see. Oh my God. No, this is great. Because that's what I was hoping too, is that this topic would lead us in different directions that were tangential to this topic, which I think it has done that. We've meandered through the labyrinth of this topic, which I think everything we talked about, I think is rolls back to the one owner guitar concept, or again, based on what your perception is of one owner guitars. But yeah, I still think it's fascinating, because there's all the jargon associated with, used guitars and vintage guitars. It's a player's guitar or whatever, all the things that people say.
Player's guitar, yeah. That's a good one though. I like that. That one I can instantly know the
Yeah,
meaning of
you
that. This
get,
is a player's guitar. I buy player's guitars usually,
yeah,
or close to maybe good care player's guitar. Nothing that I bought is like super collectible or ever will be. And I don't,
yeah,
I don't fret over that. When we talked about in the past, I mean, my I don't want a guitar that I'm afraid to play in a crappy club. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Because I
yeah,
play guitar and I want a guitar. I buy a guitar because it inspires me and I want to use it. I want to hear it and I want to play it. And if I can't play it in the places I play, it's like I don't want it. I don't want
yeah.
to burst. I appreciate them as a historic thing. Not that I'm ever going to have one, but
Yeah. But that's another thing too, is I think there are terms that are probably a little more universally understood, right, than one owner This
Dog.
player's dog. But
This burst is a dog.
yeah, that are more on the money. But the player's guitar, I think everybody kind of knows. Okay, it's got some wear, it's worn in, it's been played a while, and so it's
And
yeah.
you can get it for, most importantly, you can get it for a reasonable price. So a
Exactly.
guitar
Yeah.
player can afford to play this because it's like a
Yeah.
melody maker that somebody put a humbucker in and did a good
A
job or something.
refin or something.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I
Which is
know
cool.
that's what's left for us people who really
So
love
we get the
those.
crumbs, which are still pricey now, but
They're cool. Like some, I mean, I remember from my tenure in vintage guitar shops, the things I remember are really weird. I remember, and this is one maybe just several years ago, a really cool 50s Les Paul Jr. that someone tastefully put a humbucker in. Right there, it's like you
yeah.
just ruined. I mean, I'm a huge P90
yeah.
person, but it sounded great. They must have used a big pickup, and it just like
Oh, that's
you
cool.
a humbucker in a Gibson with mahogany, you just can't go wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This P90 either, but like I said, this knocked a huge amount of money off this guitar, and it was just a really cool. I mean, you got all the coolness of the lightweight, just the way the guitar feels of a
Yeah.
Les Paul Jr. and a humbucker sound, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of things that stick with me, and I remember those more than the pre-war Martins and all that stuff, which are cool, but I just don't look at it the same way, I
Yeah,
guess.
me too. I think that's cool. And I don't feel as bad buying something like that if somebody did it back in the 70s or whenever, They
Right.
bought that guitar, they did this thing to it now. And like you said too, if they use something that's cool, like the pickup is cool and everything else, and it sounds good and it plays well, that's cool. Yeah. And I don't feel guilt about like, you know, doing it myself or
Right.
somebody doing a bad job or getting bad components. And then it's like, well, now it's just a piece of crap.
Yeah, if they used a Kaler instead of a Floyd, something like that.
Cool, man. Well, I think we covered it. And yeah, so one owner guitars, people, let us know what your perception of that is or what that means to you. I'd love to hear from other people what that means to you. Thanks ever so much for listening. We really appreciate it. We're still proud members of the Ruinous Media Network. Check for us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and wherever you consume your podcasts, and check us out on chrisandricktalkguitars.com and keep listening. We really appreciate it. What do you got?
Play guitar.